Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're tuning in from and when you're listening. My name is Mackenzie New Walker, and I work as the director of the West Virginia Mine Wars Museum, a grassroots institution that educates and preserves a people's history of the Coal Wars that shook the Appalachian region in the 20th century. Our museum is located in historic Matewan, and we've been around for 9 years now. The museum's work entails a diverse public programming, including our Mine Wars Forum program. We have a small team of 3, soon to be 4 people, and we work daily to educate and preserve the stories of coal miners and their families' effort to unionize the coal fields of southern West Virginia. We preserve and curate artifacts and exhibits, both online and in person. We provide lesson plans and resources for teachers to get this history in their classrooms. And most recently, we've been building monuments in southern West Virginia. I am so excited to be back once again to welcome y'all to our very first episode of Mine Wars Forum Season 4. We launched this particular program way back when in 2020, which was at the onset of the pandemic, and it was a way to keep this history alive in a public forum. And we're super proud to keep this programming going 4 seasons later, 4 years later. This year's Mine Wars Forum has been made possible in part by the West Virginia Humanities Council. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program do not necessarily represent those of the council. Tonight, I am really stoked to welcome Sam Wallman to the forum. Sam is a movement artist, comics journalist, and a member of Workers Art Collective living on unceded Wurundjeri County in Melbourne, Australia. His graphic essays and agit-pop drawings have been published in The Guardian, The New York Times, and the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. Sam is a committed unionist, having worked as an organizer for the National Union of Workers and a shop steward prior to that. He has drawn cartoons for over 100 unions and worker organizations around the world, and currently works out of an art studio in Melbourne's Trades Hall, the world's oldest union building. His first book-length work, Our Members Be Unlimited, a comic about workers and their unions, published by Scribe, is out now, and we're going to drop a link in the comments so you can grab your copy. I want to say welcome, Sam. Thank you so much for being here.
No worries. Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it. Good to see you again.
Yeah, likewise. So we're kicking off right at 5:30 here in West Virginia. What time is it where you're at?
It's like 9:30 a.m. So it's a civil hour. It's kind of the only time we're all awake, so it makes sense. But I've been getting up at 4 a.m. for this new job lately. So 9. This is luxurious, actually. I'm fine.
Cool. So Sam, we kind of got into this a little bit with the bio that I just read, but what did you do before you were a labor comics journalist?
Well, I've always been drawing forever, like ever since I was a tiny kid. And then, as for work, I worked in warehousing a lot and did disability support work for a long time, and worked in call centers, partly because you can draw while you're on the phone. And then through the call center work, I got elected to become a delegate or a shop steward. And then through that, got kind of poached by my union to work for them for a while. And then started to realize when I got more involved in unions, the utility of the art, and that just started to take a bigger role in my life. And at a certain point, I was like, I'm better at drawing than organizing, so I'll just go with that. So that's the trajectory, more or less.
Was there like a particular moment, or maybe it was a stream of moments that led you to being, a labor comics?
Um, I do remember like just being kind of almost surprised how much my coworkers were into some of the drawings because it's just yeah, like I said, it's something that I've always done, just a way to express myself and kill time, and it almost has like a meditative function for me. So of course I would be just drawing. If we're on the phones, you'd imagine like what the person you were talking to looked like, or you'd vent, or draw yourself hanging yourself with the phone cord or some just stupid throwaway things, and people would be like, "Wow, wow!" And I'm like, "Really? Okay." And then like I feel like we're all sort of understand ourselves in relation to other people, and that happened with my work. I was like, "Oh, okay, this actually might mean something to people." And the more I got involved in organizing and union stuff, um, and kind of got frustrated with how invisible our efforts are, like, and how abstract politics is and campaigning is, and how everything gets lost to time, and it's just hard to articulate these struggles to everyday people. So yeah, I kind of just like started to marry those things together because I was just like, we need to try harder to make this stuff visible. Obviously, a lot of other people are doing that already, but we were just like, what skills can we bring to the table to help articulate this stuff?
Yeah. Can you remember like your first publication, where it was or who it was with?
Oh, I can't really remember. I mean, like we would put stuff out as even teenagers. We would make like little zines and stuff like that, and that was the most fun sort of work. But I think I did something for like a flyer against a high-rise development that was happening near our house when I was like 18, maybe. But um, I can't remember really. That's a good question. I probably hate it. Like I hate like 80% of my old work, so I'd be like, ah. But that's kind of my mate has a joke that he's like, that's the only reason artists keep making new work, so no one looks at their old stuff.
Yeah, I think everyone can relate to that, at least a little bit, for sure.
I'm
Um,
not as bad as I think Chris Ware, that cartoonist. He literally goes online and buys his old work to burn it. Get it out of circulation.
yeah. I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about the art studio that you're working out of. I mentioned it earlier, but it sounds so interesting.
Yeah, it's really special. Like the building, Victorian Trades Hall, is like yeah the oldest continually operating labor union building on the planet, and it's like yeah where the campaign for the 8-hour day was run out of, and first one on the planet, and the anti-conscription campaign that stopped people being unconsensually sent off to war here was run there, and just it's like the heartbeat of Melbourne to me. Like it's the political HQ in my opinion. Like after any rally or strike, people meet up there. And I remember like we had Occupy here as many other cities in the world, and after the cops smashed everything up, like we're like, what do we do? We just all went, oh, let's go to Trades Hall. So you go there and try and reconvene, and it's just like our default space kind of, and it's run art class. It hasn't just been an industrial place. Like it's always seen the working class as like a three-dimensional force. So they've for over 150 years they've had like art classes when art was even more elite, if it's possible to imagine that. Like they would run painting classes after work hours, and some of our most beloved artists got trained there. And yeah, they would offer residencies to artists. And then I think in the 80s, this is over a really long time. In the 80s, they rebooted it, and some artists who have become our friends subsequently, which we love, like we love that connection to these older folks. Like they were doing work in this tower in the hall, and we ended up rebooting that after it died down for like 10 years. Maybe there was not a lot of art stuff happening, and then through the Workers Art Collective, we started another like sort of I don't know, it's like an experiment, I guess, because we're all working in the same sort of area doing this activist art and trying to click into grassroots stuff going on. There's maybe like a dozen of us and maybe 8 of us in the studio, but we all try and just like reject the fighting over scraps mentality that could come because there are finite gigs, and we're just like, no, we're actually all going to back each other and collaborate where we can and share our resources and equipment and like try to have parties where we get different parts of the movement together and have film nights and try to give a bit of soul to what's going on otherwise. Like, because we're kind of uniquely placed, because we're not, if you're in one union you might be siloed off from other industries, but because we're just these ragtag artists, we can like try and bring people together from different parts of the left and different unions. So that's another part of our function, as well as making visual art.
That's awesome. It also sounds like a really great place for like a museum or like a labor exhibit.
There is a museum there now. I'll send you a walkthrough. Yeah, the Workers Museum. It opened like 2 years ago. It's really well done, actually.
Sweet. We should.
I have to crossover.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So your work has taken you a lot of places, and out of all of the places in the world, I met you in Matewan. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about what your experience was like in Matewan, and also like what brought you to the United States.
Well, my partner is from the US, so that's why, and my brother used to live there, so I spent a fair bit of time there. But I think Matewan was just on my radar because it's just one of those, the Battle of Blair Mountain comes up when you're a nerd like me, like like the Triangle, Shirtwaist Factory Fire, or Haymarket, or the Battle of Blair Mountain. These are just things that you hear about in the back, and you're like, I should look that up one day. And I think maybe the film might have helped me get a bit more texture to my understanding. If anyone watching hasn't seen Matewan, the film, a great resource, and just helps communicate a little bit more of what happened, which also kind of was a bit of an inspiration in retrospect for my book, because just how we were talking before about having entry points into these movements and trying to make these invisible pasts an invisible presence, even like how do you make them tangible? And I think that movie did a really good job of that. I don't know if I would have made it down there without that, but also Sean Slifer, your fellow. What is his role there?
Sean is their creative director at the museum. So he handles all of our beautiful exhibits and manages their collection and also website.
He's a legend. He did a lot to help get us down there as well. So now our buddies in the Trillbillies helped host us as well. So there are a few little forces pulling us there, which was special. But I also just feel like there are like just some weird parallels with Australia and Appalachia, like just extractive settler colonial stuff, and just like coal making these places but also really damaging them, and kind of being both dismissed as like irrelevant backwaters in some ways and beholden to Washington, but not, because we get called like 51st state or whatever, and you guys get called like the external colony or whatever. So I do feel like there's a little bit of overlap. Like we don't have them mountains in the same way, but there's some. It was easy to understand what was going on at some levels there.
Yeah. Did Matewan meet your expectations when you came?
Yeah. Loved Matewan. I really want to go back. Just so historical, just in people's heads still. Like the union's still alive there as well, and just the amount of care that people are taking to build the museum and just to preserve what happened there, because it could very well be lost to time, but you guys are keeping it going. And even just, there's still organizing happening there too. It's not all historical, which I think is important to highlight.
Yeah. I always tell folks, like, when you come into Matewan and you haven't been there before, like, it reminds you of a postcard because the downtown is very much still well preserved. The buildings look like they did, um, generally speaking, in 1920, when Sid Hatfield was walking the streets.
Yeah, it's not hard to imagine. Oh, especially when there are literally bullet holes. You're like, oh, okay, that's literally the bullet hole, right?
Yep, yep.
Yeah,
Um,
and just the ecology as well. Like, I mean, we were there in sort of winter, so we would love to come back and see it in spring. Or like, nature's beautiful anytime, but I really want to see those colorful leaves and yeah, see it in its when it's just popping.
yeah.
Everyone was saying that. Everyone we were meeting was like, "You gotta come back another time." I'm like, it's not usually like this.
Yeah, Maitland usually doesn't get a lot of visitors in the wintertime either. We have like a sort of a tourist season where people come in the spring, summer, and fall. And fall, every season is beautiful, but West Virginia in November will take your breath away with the mountains. Um, you had mentioned the movie Matewan. Was that the first time that you like stepped into this history, or do you remember? The first time that you learned about the Mine Wars or Matewan? Because, a lot of people around here and a lot of our visitors are like, um, always share they never learned about it in school, which was very intentional. And so I wonder if you could speak to like, how did you come to learn about the Mine Wars? How did you come to learn about unions as a whole?
Um, I think the movie probably was my first in-depth engagement with the story of what happened there. I definitely heard about it just in passing, but in the way of like you always hearing of things that you should one day look up. But unions, like, yeah, I came to them through. I was already involved in like activism and stuff, but started. I was having frustrations in my job, so that was sort of leading me to be interested in worker organizing. But the thing that really hit it home for me was actually another film called Rocking the Foundations, which is about the BLF, the Builders and Laborers Federation, who were um, when they amalgamated, they became the CFMEU, coincidentally, which is the union that now covers coal miners. But in the 70s, they undertook, yeah, like on this poster, the Green Bands, my favorite union story, which is when construction workers refused to take part in demolition or building of socially or environmentally destructive buildings, and or any projects really. Like they wouldn't knock down a forest or build this yuppie apartment complex if it was going to knock down public housing, or they stuck their neck out for intersectional issues. And yeah, the bosses were just like, what do you care about this? Don't you just care about pay rises and maybe workplace health and safety? And they're like, no, we care about everything going on actually. And yeah, they protected like some of the most special places in Australia. And yeah, they changed a lot. Like they introduced heritage protection for old buildings. A lot of the buildings, even near my house, were saved by them. And they just showed like a way that a democratized and empowered working class can like institute whatever reforms they want through this whole other mechanism. They even did like some interesting stuff, like going on strike in support of queer people, like a lesbian teacher who got fired. They got her job back by refusing to work on this construction site at the university she was at. And this is all before the gay rights movement even. So learning about all that, I was like, oof, okay. These people are not just rednecks or bogans or whatever. Like, so I know similar issues that you guys are pushing back against, this misconception of everyday people being inherently backward or whatever. So I think that just made me be like, oh, okay, this is like a way that you reach millions of people is through organizing workers. And yeah, I just got kind of obsessed with it from there. And then it became really embodied when I was starting to feel it through my job. So, and now I'm just lost to it, unfortunately.
Yeah. Does the Australian curriculum teach about labor history or labor unions?
No, not really. I mean, they might. Well, I mean, because our contribution to the planet is winning the 8-hour day. Um, so they might touch on something really far back, but they won't explain how it's relevant today or how, like, they won't want you to draw any links. They'll be like, yeah, they were really important because they got rid of child slavery, child, exploitation, and they did some really good stuff back then. But they won't talk about how they're still necessary. They still exist. Nothing like that, really. I mean, if you ask the conservatives, they say that we get taught a lot about unions, but we really don't.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. What so Australia still has a coal industry. Is there like active labor organizing happening in that industry? Do you see like
Yeah,
any
yeah.
similarities or differences to, Mingo County, for instance?
Um, there are there's like a funny saying that, like, coal is to Australian politics what guns are to US politics, because it's just very divisive, very controversial, like decides elections. Um, but in the end, I mean, I think similarly to there, it's just such an automated industry that, yeah, people will say all these jobs, we need these jobs. There aren't many jobs in coal extraction anymore. They don't want to tell you that, but there is still amazing organizing happening, like the CFMEU that represents them. Um, it's like a lot of these democratic forces, it is a bit split, and there are forces that are more keen to embrace a just transition than others. And those forces have been central to this push to build the biggest offshore wind farm in the southern hemisphere, like right off a former coal community, and they're like the union is insisting that the same workers that have lost their job from the coal get the job on the wind farm sticking out of the ocean. Very optimistic and sci-fi kind of vision. And yeah, they're also trying to insist on certain levels of Aboriginal employment and just seeing it as a way to redress a number of the messed up things that have come from coal. There's cool stuff happening. The union also, I think notably, I remember telling Sean Slyford this, and he was like, "What?" Because the CFMU effectively got rid of the black lung in Australia for a really long time. Like, it's been coming back the last 5 or 10 years a little bit, but more or less it was seen as a thing of the past, which
Wow.
Australia loves to talk about. Like, we got rid of black lung, and they don't say that the union did it, but they did, really.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's an issue that is not on the decline. If anything, it's on the rise in Appalachia, for a number of reasons. One of which is they're cutting more rock than they are coal, and
Oh,
the
okay.
miners' lungs are quite literally just hardening. So
And
that's
everyone thinks it's like a thing from 100 years ago. No, no, no.
yeah, it's still very real. People are getting it at younger ages. It's not just folks that are retiring or getting to that age. Um, I wonder, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that unions are facing today, sort of as it, taking a global perspective?
Um, I feel like just the same stuff that we've always faced. Yeah, even the same. It's the same social dynamics and class dynamics as were around in the Battle of Blair Mountain. It's the boss is still a boss, and worker is still a worker. There's still every workplace is still run as a totalitarian dictatorship effect. That sounds over the top, but that's literally how it is in most workplaces. So I feel like people feel like that can't change because it is actually really hard to change. When you have the extreme wealth inequality, it's how do we actually redress that? It's kind of, people don't want to be setting themselves up for heartbreak, so they just come sort of cynical already because it's easier than trying to fight, I think. And maybe that's on us. Maybe we haven't had enough wins to bring people along, and especially younger people. I feel like young people probably just don't know what unions are, and you could say that in like blaming young people, but I think that's our fault for not being able to articulate this stuff properly and making it relevant to their lives. So that's kind of why I wanted to make this book, because it's just the whole movement is so abstract and it's like this secret society, like hidden in plain sight. It's cool. I was like, yeah, let's try and make a thing that young people can get into, because like in Australia, there's like one other overview book of the. It's more the history of unions, but it's kind of dry. It's a good resource, but like I feel like we're not making enough stuff that reaches people where they're at. Like that's why I like that Boots Riley film. Sorry to bother you. That was a really good resource as well.
Yeah. I mean, you make a good point. For a long time, labor history, especially the mine wars, were just like completely omitted from textbooks. And as a result, people who are my age, I had a girlfriend who was just like, set me down and was like, "No, what is a union? Give it to me in terms." And
yeah. How would people learn this stuff? Like the whole status quo is against people knowing this. Like again, I sound like a nutcase, conspiratorial, but it's just not in the interest of like people that own the media or the people that set the curriculum or legislation. They don't really want us making trouble. So we've got to tell the stories ourselves. That's why the museum's so important too, in my opinion.
yeah, for sure. So one thing that the museum did this past year, in large part thanks to Sean, we expanded our bookshop. So we have like over 30 plus titles, and we're trying to really build out, a comprehensive library of like all things mine wars history, all things labor unions. And we're so excited to be carrying your book. And so I wondered if you could talk a little bit about it. I think, we're talking about how do you reach young people, how do you bring them into the conversation. I think you're doing this in a really like unique, engaging, and fun to read way, by creating a comics book. And so I guess my first question is like, when and how did you decide like, hey, I'm going to write a book?
I don't know. I feel like I remember a mate of mine describing artists as like existing to plug gaps that they perceive in the world, and I was very much just like this needs to exist. There's so many things that like questions that I had when I started getting involved that I wish had been laid out for me, and that I just gleaned from all the people that were gracious enough to share their knowledge with me. I was like, I'm just gonna steal their insight and stick it in this book. And it did. Like it was a long process. It took like 5 years to make, which I felt very guilty to my editor and publisher. But I do think in the end it benefited from that, because things kept happening that I would be like, oh, like the union would break my heart as they do, and I'll be like, actually, I need to have a bit more of a critique in there, or this. I could actually imagine this thing happening in the future. How would we respond to that? So trying to like fold as much as I could, so it's just like a 101 kind of text. But it was tricky trying to make it something that, like we've been saying, would appeal to younger people, and be an entry point and wouldn't presume that they know anything, but also hopefully it can be interesting to people that already are involved. So that was like walking and chewing gum a little bit. Yeah, but hopefully I pulled that off. I don't know.
Yeah, 5 years. That's incredible. I
On and off. Sometimes I would just be like, I don't want to touch it for months. And then again, that probably benefited it, because I'm like fermenting something. I come back with fresh eyes and go, oh, that is awful. No one told me that when I started. I wish someone had said, this might take you several years. It's very easy to like sign a book deal, and then you just, that's it, you're locked in.
Well, I wonder for folks who haven't read it or picked up their copies, like, could you give an example of a kind of story or the kinds of stories that folks would find in it?
I think I talked about the green bands and the pink bands, which I was mentioning before. So it tries to I saw it as like a drill core sample, kind of trying to just like really zoom out and back in and out. So I'm like, because at the start I was thinking, oh, well, I make this about Australian unionism, and is it more useful? Is there more utility if it's like more specific to the texture here? But I thought like, no, this is actually just like, it's not that different if you're a worker in one country or the other. Like, and I tried to make it about sort of what it means to like come together as a species almost at that sort of level. So that was my objective, is to zoom out that far. But I use like some anchors through it, like in my experience working at, I spent like a year working at Amazon. So that's like a big chapter, is my clunky experience of trying to like bring my fellow workers into the fold of the union there. And Amazon like is scattered throughout the book, like in most chapters in one way or another. But yeah, it starts like at the start of capitalism and a couple hundred years ago, and almost tries to predict the future in some ways. So there's a long timeline in it, but that's just the benefit of comics. Like it can still be kind of ambitious, but also really goofy and playful and unpretentious, which I think is good. I mean, like people just approach cartoons and comics with their guard down for whatever reason. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, for sure. So I mentioned we do have it at the museum, but we sold out already. And so we're
Woo!
looking to get more copies. Where can other folks, get their hands on it?
I know in the States that I've never been there, but I would love to go to Powell's Books in Portland, Powell. They're a unionized bookstore, and they sell it. And I think if you buy it through their online website, you get like 7.5%. I think goes to ILW Local 5 Strike Fund. So that's cool. That's neat. And yeah, just don't buy it on Amazon. My friends love roasting me that it's sold on Amazon. Like, leave me alone. They run the world. What am I meant to do?
Well, we just dropped a link in the comments for folks who are watching if you want to grab a copy. And isn't it also available digitally? Did I see that somewhere?
I think it is. Yeah, I think it's an ebook. Maybe it's cheaper that way. I mean, you can also get it from your library probably, or if they don't have it, like ask them to get it in. That would be awesome. Because
Yeah.
I do hope it's the kind of thing that people just pick up, and it opens some portals for people. Because yeah, there's a whole bunch of different anecdotes and stories in there. I really hope young people are like, oh, maybe this is the thing.
Yeah.
This unionism trip.
Yeah, what is this old stuff? It's
Yeah,
cool that it's
still around unions? Is that still a thing?
it's so cool that you talk about your own personal experiences in it though and bring it up to present day and things that are happening.
I feel
Um,
like that's the strength. Comics like are at their best when they're autobiographical, because it's a very personal art form in some way, and a lot of the most beloved comics have been people exploring it, like a bit of self-expression, and you can use a lot of visual metaphor to try and convey your weird inner life. And but I also, I like to have a little bit of dry politics in there to like, they all like offset each other, hopefully.
yeah. So what other stuff are you working on? What do you have going on now that this book is out in the world? Are you visiting places or what's going on in your life?
I actually started a day job because I'm just like, I'm still gonna keep drawing, but I want to take the pressure off having to wring my art out for money. So I've got like a job at the docks now, and I can draw when there's no ship there, which is amazing. And so I'm kind of just like enjoying having co-workers again, and being an artist is a lonely job. They say that's like the number one OHS issue of doing art, is like the solitude. So
Mhm.
enjoying hanging out with people and using my body at work, and so that's kind of just my immediate goal. And just taking a breather after that that huge project. I feel like I'm a little bit puffed from it still. I'm just like, okay, give me a second.
Yeah, totally.
What's going on at the museum next? What's the next thing happening there?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we are getting ready to launch a commemorative campaign for the 5th anniversary of the educators' strike. So we'll have more details to come soon. But
Good
Sean,
idea first.
yeah, Sean Kirsten and I are working on that, and we're also hiring a new person. So we're going
Cool.
to bring on an education coordinator. Applications close this week. If anyone's watching and they want to throw their hat in the ring, I encourage them to do so. Come work with us. It's super fun and super meaningful work. You know, I know not everyone gets to have a job that they care about deeply, but this is an opportunity to do that. We do
Yes,
have a couple.
very special manifestation.
Yeah, for sure.
We need like 10,000 of these places.
Yeah. It'd be nice, you know, folks have asked if there's, like labor sites that are connected in Appalachia or in the United States. We haven't figured out exactly how to do that, but it's on our radar, you know.
Oh, to link them up, the existing ones.
Hmm.
Oh,
Yeah,
just need sweet, sweet institutional backing.
for sure. How can Sam? We do have a couple questions from the audience, but I wanted to ask first: how can people support the work that you do? How can they support your art, other than the obvious, buying the book? Make sure to get Sam's book.
Yeah, buy the book. Yeah, maybe trying to get it into a library. That would be a meaningful thing because then other people can hopefully find it too. That would be number one, I reckon. Yeah, I have a Patreon that people can give me like $2 a month to keep doing this work. Like probably like half of the art that I do, I don't get paid for. So that just takes the boot off my neck a little bit when I have a little bit of extra income from Patreon, so I can sort of make the decision about which drawings would be most politically useful as opposed to which ones will pay my bills. And yeah, if people support me there, I send them stuff in the mail as thanks. But yeah, no, just keep going with it. Everyone plugging away in there, organizing their workplaces and stuff like that. That's the number one goal.
Yeah. Cool. So we've got a question from Don Slifer. He said he joined late. He said, how would Sam compare the power and influence of the labor movement in Australia versus the United States? And folks who are watching, if you have questions, just drop them in the comments and we'll do our best to get to them.
It's a familiar surname, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we know that guy.
Yeah, that's surname. Well, we have a Labor Party here, so like in Britain, that's the party in government here now. How much they do for the labor movement or not is up for debate, and how over reliant we are as a movement on them to like come in and fix our problems, I think it is a bit of a problem. Like, it's definitely good that they just abolished this really terrible watchdog that was a union busting arm of government that the Conservatives had in. And when the new government got in about a year ago, since then they've fought really hard to roll back this terrible task force, which was good. But you know, there's no silver bullet. Like, I think people expect the Labor Party here to do everything for us. It's like, actually, organizing is a really messy, hard slug, and we can't just rely on people to come in from above and save us at all. So I think similar things seem to happen with the Democrats there, right? Like the disappointment with Biden and the rail strike. It's like you can definitely overstate how supportive a notionally progressive government might be. But I wonder, I'm not sure about the density I think Australia, we only have about 12% of our workforce as union members at the moment. Do you know what it is in the US at the moment?
I'm not sure, but I saw a study that came out that people's let me think of how to say it, like their preference for unions are on the rise. You know,
Oh, I saw that. That was very heartening. Hey, like
yeah,
the most positive approval rating for like many decades.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
That's cool. Yeah, I don't know if that answered the question, but
Yeah. Sean is saying too in the comments, if you request Sam's book at your local library, often they'll purchase a copy and then keep it in circulation so that other folks can pick it up there too. Are there any other questions for Sam, or Sam, is there anything else that you'd like to add that we haven't chatted about yet?
not really. No. Like, is there any way that like we can support the museum in any different ways than we've discussed?
Yeah, there's a few different ways to support the museum's work, one of which is becoming a monthly member. So much like Patreon, you can chip in at $5 a month, $10 a month. You get to choose the level, and you become a sustaining supporter of the museum, which gives us essentially unrestricted funds to do the preservation and education work that we're doing daily. So if you're able, if it's in your budget, if it's in your heart, we'll drop a link in the chat so that you can sign up, and hopefully we've got some museum members watching with us. I know that Dawn is a proud card carrying member. But there's other ways too. You know, you can share programs like that, like this. You know, help us spread the word. You can shop in our gift shop, purchase books, and support artists like Sam, as well as supporting organizations like the museum. And you can also just chip in with a donation. Come see us. We're going to be opening a little bit later this spring, and help us get the word out about Mine Wars history and labor organizing in Appalachia. Thanks for asking, Sam.
Yeah, let's make some stuff happen that in 100 years they want to make a museum about.
Yeah, that would be cool. Well, if there's no other questions, Sam, thank you. You know, for spending
No
your
worries, thank you.
time with us on today's forum. It was great catching up and you know, hear about the work that you've been doing. I know the book was in progress last time I saw you, so it's great that you know it's out in the world now. People can hold it in their hands.
It feels good. I feel like I've given birth, and now I'm like, I'm actually that metaphor doesn't carry very far because I'm like, I've given birth, and now I'm walking away. No, that's not
Yeah.
how it works. No, it's a relief, and yeah, I'm excited to come back down there and hang out with you guys again. I want to see Terry and Wilmer again, who were kind enough to put us up and give us like the full family experience when we were there, and yeah, I kind of missed that place. So hoping to be back in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I hope so too. Thanks to folks who have listened with us tonight. We're happy to have your company. I want to say thanks again to the West Virginia Humanities Council for their support in this programming. I want to say thank you to my colleague Kirsten. You cannot see her tonight, but she has been supporting us in tech as well as promotional work on tonight's episode. And as always, thanks to the members and donors who allow the museum to continue doing this work. You're going to be hearing from us over the next few weeks as we bring on new guests to the forum. We're currently refining our 2023 schedule, and hope to share that with y'all soon. For now, we're going to drop a survey link in the chat so you can let us know how we did and who you want to hear from in the future. And you can keep up with us on social media. We're on Facebook and YouTube, which you're probably using that to watch this right now. But we're also on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And you can also visit our website at wvmindwars.org and sign up for our newsletter. So we hope to see y'all next week. Good evening or good day, depending on where you're at. Bye, y'all.
Bye.